Welcome to the LA Soccer Hub Show. My name is Gio Garcia. Today is November 19th, Thursday. Today we're talking LAFC. There's a lot of LAFC news breaking as I just started recording here. Obviously, the only team in LA going to the playoffs. It's been a crazy year. It continues to get even crazier towards the end here. You know, even talking about MLS playoffs and everything going on. But to help us talk all things LAFC, we got Dave Denholm. Dave, how you doing?
How you doing, Gio? Good to talk to you, buddy.
Yeah, Dave. Like I say, it's crazy, man. It seemed like LAFC got a lifeline thrown at them, and then just the curveball of 2020 continues to happen here.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly right. The curveball is a good way to put it. But everybody's going through it, certainly. And I think more importantly, the world is going through this. So we know that sports are very important in the United States, but they're really not that important in 2020, if I can be honest. I think obviously we want to use it as an escape, Geo, but there are bigger issues, certainly, and we all have to kind of live within those parameters. And I think for the most part, one thing that's been interesting to me about the sports world is how accommodating fans really are. Most of the time fans, let's be honest, I want my way and I want it now, kind of thing. And that's not the case in 2020, I think. I think we all know deep down that these leagues, maybe making mistakes, many of them, but they're trying their best. They have to continue to try to put a product out there. They are certainly businesses and within the restrictions of certain states and counties and local governments, it's not easy. And, I think by and large, it's a good way to put it. It's just an absolute roller coaster and you just don't know. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, quite frankly.
Yeah, no, I mean, so many different crazy things, and like you mentioned about the sports. I guess for all of us, I'll just speak for myself. It's kind of been an escape from all these different things.
Yes.
Appreciative for all all the players and the staff and even the leagues to be able to put this on, and like I said, give us an escape and give us something to look at, yell at, compete, analyze, what you and I do. So you kind of just get our mind off things, but we're still reminded with all these curveballs being thrown in. But before we get too much into like the playoffs and everything, I just I I just want to know your thoughts on obviously how this year has gone for the MLS, and what do you think moving forward, for next year, how you mentioned about just different things are going on, different rules and everything depending on the cities. And how do you see the future for these teams if we are still in a pandemic or not?
Yeah, it's a good question. Really, it's the question to ask. I don't think I'm going to feel, and I'm just talking about myself. I don't think it's going to feel like a normal year even next year. I think, if that makes sense. I mean, no, certainly, hopefully, we're getting great news about vaccines, possibly, and things like that. And maybe we'll be back where fans are back in the stadium. That might change my opinion of it. Once you really get like full stadiums and you're kicking a soccer ball in anger against another team in front of 21,000 at the bank or 27,000 for the Galaxy down at I think that might change my mind, but I don't know. And again, I have no insight in this, but I don't know that I'll feel that's a normal kind of situation, maybe until 2022, realistically, because I don't know that MLS knows when they're going to start the season next year. There's been some talk. Who knows? How do you know when you're even going to begin? Usually, of course, we all know it's very early March or late February when they kick off, generally speaking, all the way till, November. But who knows? I mean, leagues are accommodating certain stuff. We know the NBA has obviously had to make a lot of changes that way. They're starting on December 22nd, which, they've already would be underway essentially. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know that I feel like all that super confident that, oh, don't worry, 2021 kickoff, everything's back to normal. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah.
So, leagues are doing the best they can, certainly. I mean, realistically, this, when you look at it from a business perspective, which again is certainly not the most important thing by any means, this is a lot of money being lost. I mean, there's just no two ways around it. And we see that in every sector. We see that from mom and pop stores, more importantly, on the corner of whatever city you live in or whatever. So there are obviously big issues, but these clubs, whatever sport, they're owned by people, and that is their business, and certainly they have to look out for that. But they obviously, you know, you just can't force this kind of thing in a pandemic, Gio. The more you force it, the worse it gets. So it's just going to have to play out. And I don't feel like 2021 is going to feel like 2019 did for me, or I suspect most people would be that way.
Yeah, hopefully it's better. Anything I think
Yeah,
anything is better than 2020 or
absolutely, and I think it will be. I do
yeah,
believe
yeah.
that.
Or
I
even
do think
2019,
2021.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think 2021 is going to be a better year than 2020 for most people. So I am positive and an optimistic person in that sense. Absolutely, I think you're right. I think that's a great point. I think we just got to hope it's just a better year. Let's build on that and
Yeah.
go from there.
No, so I mean some exciting news that came out today. It was confirmed yesterday by Kevin Baxter. Angel City FC, they're going to play at the Bank of California Stadium. NWSL's coming to LA. You have a powerhouse of just like, celebrity women from all trades, actors, singers, you name it, the list. And you even got some men there, but like them, the way they've done Angel City FC, I even love the name. Them breaking the news that they're, officially going to play at the Bank of California. What are your thoughts on having women's soccer in LA and also having it at the Bank of California?
Oh, I think it's absolutely necessary. I don't, I understand that it took longer, and I know there was another team, the Soul, obviously, a few years back, that gave it a shot too. I think they're in much better position with this team moving forward. Going forward to be a success. I am a little concerned about some of the rumblings you hear. The two fan bases, let's be honest, that's going to be tough. And I think Angel City FC knows that in a sense. They want people to come together for that team, and they should. If you love football, and if you love women's football, you likely will, come together as a group. But that was always going to be a little tricky. There's no two ways about that. What stadium to pick? One team is going to feel like their fan base. They're playing in LAFC stadium, but that's not really what it's about. It's about a team for everybody, and I love that. I think it's completely overdue and necessary. And the women's game is growing everywhere, not just in America, thankfully, but all over, and certainly LA. Gio, I've said it for years. Los Angeles is one of the best soccer markets in the world. I mean, we're talking like top 10 soccer cities in the whole world. You have to have a powerhouse women's football team here, and I think that's what Angel City is planning on doing. It might take them a little time to, you got to build, street by street, block by block. I know that's what LAFC did, and I think you can get it done for Angel City, and again, not till 2022, so they have time to continue to really put together a world-class organization that it appears that they have already started that. And I think the venue is appropriate. I really do. And I'm not just saying that because obviously I work, and I'm close with LAFC. I think it's a good fit. And I think it's a great fit where it is centrally located, get, maybe draw more people in for Angel City that way. I think it was the right choice.
Yeah, no, I mean it's exciting to finally have women's soccer again in LA, and I think it's also,
Yeah,
I think what I'm most excited is the people behind it.
sure.
We've seen how LAFC has been able to build up with obviously it's not just the money, but also having the people. We see at LAFC having an academy. There's a process, and what I'm really going to look forward to from LA Angel City FC is how they have that system in place, right? Because I feel like right now in the United States and even in LA, I feel like women's soccer is kind of underserved. And if you
Mhm.
have the right people, which it looks like on paper, and you have able to produce a product where you just get young talent to this team, essentially what we're starting to see from LAFC, and really serve that women's community, that much needed women's community that is so passionate. And I know this, how much they love soccer, but the media and all the attention and all that hasn't really been there. But I'm seeing the big names, some of the A-listers on there, but also seeing some former players, women's and even Galaxy players are on this team, and I just really hope that they really do produce are able to produce players from Southern California to get them to this team. And eventually, this is the pathway to the U.S. women's national team and just different things like that. Just being able to build a team, a product, and, something that everybody can be proud of.
No, I think so. I think that's exactly right. And I think you will. I think you'll see a mixture. I think you certainly need the local connection to players. And there's plenty of that in Southern California, plenty of talent in the women's game in Southern California. There's no doubt about that. Then you need that local connection. Then you need the U.S. women's national team connection. So certainly you would expect Angel City FC to look at that. They don't need my advice on this, but this is how I would kind of build it. You go after a couple of big names with the U.S. women's national team, recognizable names that you can really market from the get-go. You get the local talent, certainly that's ready to play now, but also build the academy. Certainly get in on the ground floor as early as you can with as young a players as you can to start to build that up. And then you need to look for foreign talent, from other countries, because the women's game, as we said, is growing everywhere. And there's certainly nothing wrong with bringing in names like back in my day, Marta and things, certainly that everybody knew. Even if you weren't a huge fan of the women's game or even a fan of soccer, because the World Cup is so powerful, Gio, it's such an amazing marketing tool for soccer, men and women's soccer, in not just the United States, but the world, that every 4 years you have that competition that you do need, if you're Angel City FC, I think, to, keep an eye on that next World Cup and, be alert to who maybe that next player is that you need to go get. And now, again, there's competition now coming from England was getting a better league. It's still a ways to go yet, but they are certainly spending cash on that and spending money. Places like France and all over, it's growing, but that means more competition to also sign those players. So they definitely have their work cut out for them. But to me, what I like about it is, as you said, ownership. You're only as really good as a professional sports team as your ownership is. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, they seem to be doing it right. Slowly, take your time, make sure you get things correct along the way. And those building blocks, if you have that, you can withstand certain things. Like LAFC is only in their third year. This was not a great season for LAFC. Obviously, with all the COVID and everything else, we know that there are some reasons for that on some level, not just the football. But you already built a base of, hey, we've been doing things right essentially since day one, and your fans know that. And I think Angel City has to look at that and be like, we got to slowly build this and take our time and get these things right along the way, and that will help us with that base to make sure that they know that we are trying to win, whether it happens the very first day or not. Now, in LAFC's case, Gio, they were successful from literally the first kick, as it happens in Seattle, which is where they're going on Tuesday.
Exactly.
But so, that doesn't hurt either. But I think if you build that base, the fans will know that. They know you're going in the right direction. That is crucial.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely hit on so many different things there, and I feel like they have a great mirror to look at, obviously LAFC and how they've done it, and we know there's a lot of partnerships there, a lot of things going on. So I
And they do
would,
have they do have a mirror down in the Galaxy too. I look, people know my history. I am black and gold, and I know the Galaxy hate me now for it. That's fine. But I did used to be a Galaxy season ticket holder back in the day. I love football, and I saw what they did and how, Angel City, this is a city of winning football. Bottom line, I mean, the most successful franchise in MLS history is the Galaxy, certainly with championships, and now LAFC seems to be taking over that mantle and maybe ready to take that next step to start winning MLS Cups and start to really add to the trophy room. I think Angel City has two franchises to look at, and off the pitch too,
yeah,
financially, everything. I mean, there's plenty. There's a good I guess, blueprint, if you will, for lack of a better cliche, of how to build successful soccer organizations, football organizations in LA.
yeah. No, I was gonna say, just in terms of expansion team, they definitely have a good, obviously, mirror to look off of LAFC. But I definitely believe that this is a team that can bring both clubs, both fan bases, I should say, together from both sides. I know there's a lot of rumblings now that, that they're playing the Bank California Stadium, but it's an exciting time, especially for women's soccer in LA. And again, they're gonna play the first. They should be playing in spring of 2022, so they got more than enough time, like he said, to get this right. But let's move
This,
on.
this is iced tea. Just
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. We know you're having whiskey at
I
9 a.m. 9
I don't
a.m.
I
LA
don't
time.
partake. It's iced
It's okay.
tea.
You should have told me. I would have brought mine too. This is not actually coffee, Dave. uh,
I'm no hero. I get my caffeine out of iced tea. I don't drink a lot of coffee, but I'm no
yeah,
hero.
but for those listening, Dave is drinking from a clear cup, glass cup. Looks like whiskey, but he says
It is
it's
a
not.
little fancy. I gotta admit, I grabbed the wrong
That
one
is a
again.
fancy cup for it just to be apple juice, Dave. That's all I'm gonna say.
Thank you. Thank you.
um, but yeah, moving on. Obviously, big match for LAFC going in this next Tuesday against Seattle. Just kind of want to get into a timeline of things. It looked like LAFC was going to be without their international players. Then rumblings came earlier this week that MLS was looking to book charter flights for all the MLS international players that that were out abroad. And then, obviously we found out Jose Cifuentes, Diego Palacios, who are with the Ecuadorian national team, did catch COVID. And then you're like, okay, two out of four wouldn't be bad. And then you start to hear that Luis Suarez, who plays for Uruguay, he got COVID. And then my mind was like, all right, hopefully Diego
Yeah, man.
Rossi and Brian Rodriguez don't catch it. Come to find out, Diego Rossi gets it. Brian Rodriguez has not got it. Has tested negative. So 3 out of the 4 players have tested positive for COVID. And then rumblings were coming out if Brian Rodriguez would come alone. And the Athletic just broke the news that that all the South American internationals won't be available for the playoff spots. And I just kind of want to just read this just to kind of just clarify it. Um, it says Rodriguez from Uruguay and Arriega, Seattle's Xavier Arriega, and Mendes with Ecuador. None of these 3 players tested positive for COVID-19 with their national teams, but the sources said that MLS Players Association medical experts did not feel confident enough that they were not in close contact with the individuals who tested positive to allow them back on the charter flights. Which essentially, I guess, makes sense. So you don't want to get other players on your team to catch COVID or anything like that, because one, that would just ruin all of the playoffs, right? If these players come back and I don't they infect the other players or whatever, and essentially the playoffs would be off. So I guess it makes sense on that aspect, but it's unfortunate for LAFC because it seemed like, okay, Diego Ross, you were gonna get the full roster. You're gonna get the best players playing the MLS playoffs. And MLS did everything they could. They did
Yeah.
everything they could to make this happen. They even talked with these medical experts to get their approval, and then and you find out that these players catch COVID. So, like I said, it's 2020. What do you make of all this? What's going on with these outbreaks and these situations with LAFC? Because essentially, they were already planning to play without these 4 international players.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah, look, it comes down to this: the season would have been over almost 2 weeks ago, were it a regular year, right? And I hate to keep going back to it, but we just have to accept that you just have to do the best you can as a league to put together as good a product as you can for your fans to watch, and in this case, mostly watch on television. That's all you can do. And they tried, the charter flights I thought were a great idea. Now that you look at it, there's been a lot of outbreaks with the European players, like the people who go back and forth, these European international games. These international games have, been very tricky in terms of trying to stop the spread of COVID. And that's around the world. So this is not an MLS problem by any means per se, or specific to MLS. So you try your best. You try to protect the players first and foremost. I think that's what they're doing by not allowing, frankly, Arriaga and Rodriguez and Megson to actually, or Mendez rather, to Jackson Menton to come back and play. I think it's a smart move. Unfortunately for those guys, and I'm sure they're disappointed in that, but I'm sure they also know that it just doesn't make sense to rush that. So again, it's like I am just of the, I mean, make no bones about it. I love MLS. I love LAFC. I want to see the league, be 100% healthy and everything. But I've said this for the MLS's back tournament. You have to try it. And, the playoffs are there. This is what they're scheduled. Now, if it gets out of hand, then you have to, that maybe things will have to be shut down, unfortunately. And we know that. We know that going in, though. They're doing their best. I enjoy what's been, the league and how it's, kind of on the pitch, how it's developed in 2020. Is it perfect? Of course not. But, it's the best you can do. And I know people complain. People like to complain about a lot of stuff. We know this, Gio. But I really have to tell people, like, to think about what you tweet sometimes, or just think about it for more than like 5 seconds. Like, oh, I can't. This is so Bush League, MLS. How can they have MLS? How can they do the playoffs and then one team might have to forfeit? Well, what else can you do? You're not going to send a team out there with 10 players who have COVID to play, right? That's not the right idea. So if you already have a tournament style playoffs set up and you are going to commit to playing those, what are you supposed to do with a team who maybe catches COVID? We know it's not that hard, it seems like, to catch. It's possible that these teams can pass it along. Unfortunately, we've seen it in the regular season with teams like Colorado, especially missing several games. Not their fault. What do you do with a whole playoff structure if one team happens to have, too many cases? You may have to say, well, your season's done, Gio. And that could happen to LAFC, and boy, that will hurt, and I will be upset. But it's just life in 2020. It's nobody's fault.
Yeah, and just to hit on that, so this is what came from Jeff Carlisle from ESPN. It said the MLS will try to reschedule any postponed game due to COVID-19. If a game can't be rescheduled, the team with the outbreak will have to forfeit. If both teams are dealing with COVID outbreak, the team with the higher points per game average during the regular season would be the one to advance. And that's what's the unfortunate part of it, because the thing to that is, people want to know why aren't they playing in a bubble to try to contain it, right? That's gonna if it comes down to the worst case scenario, both teams, which we don't want to happen because you're not going to see any competition, both teams catch COVID, and the team, with the highest point per game average or whatever, say it happens in a Western Conference or Eastern Conference final, that would be the worst scenario. You know what I'm saying? And I think obviously the first round, it would suck anyway to advance that. I think people, at least some of the people, is like, why didn't the MLS try to implement maybe a bubble, which they did in Orlando?
He's already sent guys away for over a month from their homes for the most part. Many of those teams were well over a month. It's just hard to do that again during the holiday season, to take people again away from their families. People
or like
forget
kind of like the MLB did. I think they didn't do the first couple rounds of the playoffs. Maybe I think they did like the last couple, the semifinals, or something like that.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah,
but this is kind of happening fast enough. With the way the MLS playoffs are. And in fairness, maybe it's an argument for a bubble if you hadn't already had one for 6 weeks or whatever. That they're not messing around with the schedule of the playoffs. It's not like you're getting a couple weeks off to prepare. This exactly. Is pretty. We're going to go after this as fast as we can. So I'm sure they thought about a bubble, but maybe they decide, well, we can get this schedule in pretty quick. These guys are not going to have 8 days off between games necessarily. But maybe we can get this in a small enough amount of time. And let's remember, if you lose, you go home. So there are going to be, there's only going to be, as you say, only a few teams potentially affected really late. That might have been another reason to maybe bring the final 4 teams in for, it might have been interesting, if there had not been another bubble, almost if you bring the final 4 teams in and let them all play each other in like a group, and then
get super creative. Yeah, there would be some arguments about that as well.
I mean, how cool would that have been? But, again, I'm not going to be the guy who wants to tell people you got to go away from your family for another month now during the holidays too. This is, again, a weird schedule. The season would have been done. MLS Cup would have already happened nearly 2 weeks ago. We're a regular year. And I think that's what everybody forgets about the international window. MLS had already made a lot of concessions on their scheduling for that window for these reasons. We don't want people missing playoff games if we can help it. even in a regular year. So, yeah, I mean, again, people are going to be upset. I don't blame them. I will be upset, unfortunately, if that happens. But, again, men and women who work for these teams, they can catch it. We don't know how. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can do everything right and still get it, essentially. I think we've seen that,
Mm-hmm.
with plenty of cases. So this is not any blame to go around. If it happens, it's very unfortunate. And I can't argue with someone, Gio, who says, well, the 2020 MLS Cup winner, if this tournament kind of falls a little bit to pieces, not to falls to pieces, but if some teams do get affected by it, boy, that's kind of an asterisk next to the MLS. Okay, well, so be it. I mean, this whole year
I think if it goes along the lines of, teams being forfeited or teams
yes,
being that, then it's gonna look about. Then I think also people are gonna, say the bubble. I hope that doesn't happen, but I think they are planning for the worst case scenario. This is MLS's worst case scenario, and I see what they're doing. They're trying to get this out in front. Like this is our scenario. This is what we
sure.
thought of. This is what potentially may happen. I
Yeah, you
think
don't want people finding out the day they watch the game on TV. You
exactly,
know what I mean? Like, oh,
exactly.
by the way, today, if one of these teams, like in an hour, we tell you that they have to no, you have to get this stuff out as soon as possible. You're right.
Yeah, and I think
So
also, I think I think the worst thing is obviously if they're not able to compete, and it happens in the Western Conference Final, Eastern Conference Final. I think that's going to be tough. But again, MLS is in a time crunch right now. They need to finish this. LAFC, Atlanta United, they all got CONCACAF like in December. So there's a lot going on, and also trades and all these different things. So I see what they're trying to do, and they're just trying to get through the rest of this year, a month and a half or whatever is left of this year smoothly, to obviously start planning for next year. And I know a lot of people are like, well, why let these players go on international duty? I think that was, looking back, I think that was the right thing to do, because you don't want to close the door on your international players, and you don't want MLS to be closed off as a league for international players for some of the biggest countries in the world. You got Uruguay, Ecuador, Colombia. You have so many players from the MLS, and you want to have that relationship. You really, even if it hurts the MLS, I think long term, I think if you're the MLS, you're looking long term, that you don't want to be that league that you get looked back on like, hey, you didn't give us our international players when we needed them for World Cup qualifying. And I think looking back at that now, I give credit, because it's not an easy thing to do for the MLS, because you're going to be without some of your biggest stars. But I think having that relationship and having that pathway where your players still have get that world attention, and it essentially is bringing that attention to you as MLS, and you don't want to close that door off. So I know people are like, you shouldn't let them go and play or whatever, but I think it's an honor for the player, it's an honor for the club, but also as a league, you also want to always have that door open for the national call-ups.
absolutely, 100% correct. Look, all deference to like Europe and Oceania and Asia. This is a CONMEBOL, CONCACAF league. I mean, that's just who is the backbone of MLS. It's players from South America and the United States and Mexico and Costa Rica and Jamaica and all the countries around here. And again, there's plenty of great players from Europe who've come here and will continue to. You have to make them available for national teams. I mean, you're 100% right. We can't become a league where people start to say, nah, I don't think I'm going there, and then that's the worst thing that could happen, and because then you don't get Diego Rossi or Brian Rodriguez even thinking about it, frankly. And again, there's a lot of factors that go into that, but you're absolutely right. That's just kind of like almost a no-brainer. Like, yeah, you have to let him go. You're not going to tell Diego Rossi, like, Diego, you probably should stick around for a first-round playoff game. Just you might not play. Turns out he doesn't for Uruguay. So what? That doesn't. He's being seen by the coaching staff. They're bringing him
Exactly.
in. He's practicing with these guys. How does he fit in? That's probably why they've been bringing him in, knowing that he's likely not going to get any minutes, but they want to see about it. And that's just all part of the game, to quote unquote. That just is, and everybody knows that in world football. So you cannot start messing around with that kind of stuff. Yes, it does hurt MLS in the very short term, but in the long term, nothing but positives out of that.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think just looking at long term, it makes sense. Even if you're going to be able without your stars here in 2020, I think this is definitely a year that obviously MLS can
True.
overlook that obviously moving forward, because you're going to have that door open for Uruguay, Ecuador, Colombia, all these players. You want to have that relationship with the national team, and you want them looking at your players, because essentially that adds value to your club long term. I know you just mentioned Diego Rossi. He won Young Player of the Year award. Incredible player. He scored 14 goals. Obviously, you and I have been able to see him up close, and seen the damage and just the excitement that he's done. Also winning Golden Boot, back to back. First time at LAFC. First time in MLS, I believe that the same team wins, same teams and the players win back to back. It's exciting for LAFC. Obviously, they're going to be without him. So I guess my question to you is, who replaces Diego Rossi? I know we saw Christian Torres, get the start last time. I know there's a couple other players on that wing side, but I think the depth is definitely going to be tested with this game. So who do you think will step up on the other side?
Well, no one replaces him. That's kind of a dumb answer, but we know that
Hmm.
certainly it's going to hurt LAFC to not have Diego Rossi in there. I like Christian Torres. I like the way he's fit in with just about everybody he's played. He knows how to play. I don't care how old he is. If you're good enough, you're old enough, and he is good enough. So he certainly fits in with a lot of what they try to do. Uh, when you're looking at it, in a likelihood, though, you might move a Danny Musovski out wide if Bradley Wright Phillips goes in the middle, or because really you're not going to put BWP on a wing at this point. And yet Musovski kind of fits better in that middle part too, but you just may have to have him play out there. Of course, we know Carlos Vela will lock down that right wing, and they'll interchange plenty like they always do during the actual 90 minutes. But yeah, I feel like that's probably what you go with in a pressure situation in Seattle in a playoff game. Maybe Christian Torres is more appropriate than to come on the second half, fresh legs, maybe some new ideas. I think that's the way Bob Bradley will go. I haven't talked to Bob about that. I don't think Bob knows yet, probably
Hmm.
for sure, if that's
He
the
doesn't
way they're
want to
going to
tell. He's not
go.
going to tell us. We should
No,
mention.
exactly. It doesn't really matter if he knows because he's not going to tell us anyway. So, but I suspect that's what we would see, something along those lines of Musovski, Bradley Wright Phillips, Carlos Vela. Certainly Christian Torres would be, right at the top of the list of, people to come off the bench then maybe to provide that fresh legs kind of feel 55th, 60th minute if you need a goal.
Yeah, another part I should have mentioned. I should have mentioned this from the beginning. We're recording this at 9 a.m. LAFC have a press call, I believe around 12:30 later today. So we'll find out more information on, obviously give us an update of what's going on. I think another player that I do see him play up top and who has played up top. I'm with you. I'm with you at BWP and Danny Masevsky. I think the only issue with that is you lack depth in that striker position. And I could see maybe either Danny start or BWP. But another player that I could see play up top on the wing is Latif Blessing. Um, we know we've seen Latif Blessing play
Sure.
right back. Obviously, he plays in the midfield, but I think LAFC has so much depth right now in the midfield that position is essentially covered. Whether you play Mark Anthony Cage, Janela, whatever. Obviously, we know Jose Cifuentes is going to be up, so there's a lot of depth there. Depending where I think Latif Blessing goes, if he's not in the midfield, I definitely see him either potentially playing up top there with Carlos Vela, BWP, or Danny Masovsky, whoever starts there at the striker, or at right back. What are your thoughts on Latif playing up there up top?
I mean, it's a great idea, actually. I hadn't thought that much about it, only because I kind of feel like I kind of was sensing that the LAFC is going to go back to that core midfield that are available. Edward, Mark Anthony K, Latif Blessing. And in some ways, against Seattle, I don't hate that. I kind of like that, getting those guys back there to really try to control the tempo of this game because one of the strengths of Seattle that people don't talk about, yes, Nico Lodero is fabulous and he's everywhere. So there's not much you can really do about that in terms of, worrying about him. You almost just have to defend him all over the pitch. It's Joao Paulo and Christian Roldan. Those
Mm-hmm.
two for Seattle have been so dominant, destroying other people's offenses and getting Seattle into the attack. They're two-way players that are very underrated. Joao Paulo was an amazing signing from Brazil. I think he's been fantastic. So I think if you put Latif in the midfield with Mark Anthony and Edward, then maybe you can kind of overpower them to a certain degree in that part of the field. Now, again, you're not going to stop Seattle for 90 minutes with guys like Jordan Morris and Nico Lodero, but if you can keep the football for most of that time. But I am intrigued by Latif up front on the wing, like you say. It just becomes kind of, how, like, what's the strongest part of that? Like, because Janela certainly fits right into the midfield. Like you said, you got plenty of depth there. He could do that, and then you move Latif up, and then maybe you then have Musovski coming in later for a goal possibility if you need it. Maybe you even start Musovski and let BWP come in for the goal later if you need that. There's more options maybe that way. That might be how it ends up. I think the Latif up front is a very intriguing idea from you. But I do also believe there's plenty of positives about having that core three guys in the midfield we've seen time and time again dominate. And, again, a lot of people will point to the defense and the people up front for LAFC. That's going to make the difference here. But it could just come down to, if Mark Anthony Kaye, Latif, and Edouard have their best games of the year, who beats them? Nobody. So you could also look at it that way. So it's definitely a puzzle here for LAFC, not just in the starting 11, but really probably you would have to say like 13 or 14 guys who are really going to play and need contributed. Not that you can't have more, of course, but you're going to really have to have that 12, 13, 14 guys that are going to win this game for you.
Yeah, and that's on that. I mean, that's why I threw that out there because after Christian Torres, the depth up top, because you're gonna obviously we know you're out with Rossi and Brian Rodriguez. Obviously, say someone comes in for Christian Torres, who's going to come in for him? Obviously, we don't know. We haven't seen practice, but I think potentially you have Latif Blessing up top. Then you can bring in Christian Torres. Obviously, I think that's just a thought right now. I think I could see that. Unless
Yeah, I don't think I think we now. I don't think we're going to see Latif in the back line. That would really
Yeah.
surprise me.
Yeah. That's my next point on the back line. We haven't seen him, and then I'm just going. What we did see in their last matchup against Portland, we saw in the back line. We saw Eddie Segura start right back, Jesus Mourinho, Tristan Blackman, and then Jordan Harvey. I think the biggest question for this back line is who starts at right back, because obviously out of necessity, Bob Bradley I believe he had to start Eddie Segura because El Monier was not available. I think he was out, maybe because of COVID. I don't know. They had him on the injury list, but he wasn't able to play. Depending who plays on that right back, you can start put the pieces of the puzzle. So if it's El Monier, if it's Eddie Segura, what are your thoughts on who is the strongest on that right back?
Oh boy, I think it's two different answers. Strongest on the right back for a whole season. It's probably not
For this game. Let's put it for this Seattle game.
For this game, just in terms of not even about just right back, but the way the right back fits in, I think you just go with what you had at Portland. I do. I think Segura, he's very comfortable on the ball. We saw that. We've seen Bob push him up into the defensive midfield at times, late in games when he brings in another defender and then pushes Eddie up a little further up the pitch to kind of control that area. And I do think in a lot of ways, you're going to end up with more like three backs anyway, a lot of times, especially Seattle. Seattle doesn't mind if LAFC brings the football right at them, right? So you're going to get into the attack plenty. A lot of that's going to come, frankly, from the right back spot often, like Eddie Segura will be up in the attack a lot, which I think they like. And then you'll have like the three backs. And then Jordan goes up certainly on the left wing a lot. Then you'll have the three backs. And it's more almost like that 3-4-3 kind of feel. So I think you just go with who you had in the back for Portland right now. Now, again, all things being equal, I don't know about health and where people are in terms of any kind of nagging injuries or, COVID related. We don't know 100% yet. So, but for me, I thought they played pretty well. Look, they had the bad giveaway at the end against Portland, which changed everything as we saw them fall to 7th because they got the draw against Portland with the late goal. And the Timbers did exactly what we did to them just the previous game against them. But I thought the defense played pretty well against Portland for the most part. Now, I know Kenneth Vermeer made some big saves. Hey, you got to have your keeper make a couple of big saves against good teams. I mean, teams are going to get chances. So to me, I didn't think the defense was really bad at all against Portland. So I would stay with that and then, go from there with your changes or what you might need to kind of figure out how to break down Seattle because the Sounders, are a very tough team to break down, especially up there against the LAFC.
Yeah, and no, I like that. I think for me, seeing Eddie Segura, he's only played that once. Obviously, I think this was the only time he's played it, maybe in all his career with LAFC at right back. And I think that was, again, this game was out of necessity because they didn't have El Munir there. They didn't have so many players. I think it was 6, 7 different
And
players
that could
because of
just be
COVID.
what happens. You
Yeah,
could be right on. They could just go right back to El Munir there. Eddie goes into the left center back spot. We pretty much know Jesus Murillo is locked down on that. But you could also you also have the option of Tristan on the right back spot,
mhm.
Munir on the left back, or Harvey. Like there
Yeah.
are options
I,
there.
ju- I
But
think I think Tristan has not looked good at right back, and I think sometimes he gets beat. I think his position is more center back. You may.
he plays an excellent right back when Carlos Vela is the right wing. If you notice those two,
I think well,
well, no, I'm
well,
saying when those two combine very well together.
well, I think
Now,
I think I I think that's an interesting caveat. I think regardless of if Carlos Vela plays or not, I just think El Munir has looked better on that right back. I would put El Munir or Latif Blessing on the right back just because of what I've seen from Tristan. He hasn't played that right back. And Bob Bradley,
but what I'm
specific.
saying though too is like when you have a Carlos Vela at the right wing, you're pinning back the defense more. Tristan has more freedom. He's a little more offensive even when Carlos Vela's at the right, on the right wing because everybody's so cautious of Carlos Vela, rightfully
Yeah,
so.
but I
He
think
beats
this is Seattle though. Seattle. I don't think you have that much what to say, that room to potentially come back. Seattle's they have so much speed and
Sure.
they're such a
But
mature
here's how you
team.
have to beat Seattle. You have to move the ball quickly away from the sidelines. It has to move fast. And the way to do that is guys like Tristan or Eddie, whoever plays it, or Mohamed Al Munir,
Mm.
perfectly. I mean, Mohamed's a great offensive weapon too. They have to give that ball to Carlos and get moving to make sure he has opportunities to get it back to them quickly because Seattle will lull you to sleep on the sides and then bring three guys at you before you even know
Quick,
what happens. And
so quick.
the ball is gone. And it's just so obvious what they're trying to do with LAFC. They try to keep it out of the middle, keep as much space. They use that sideline as another defender or whatever, wherever on the pitch. Really doesn't even matter how deep you go. And then all of a sudden there's three guys in green jerseys around the ball. And that's hard to break down for anybody.
Yeah.
Carlos Vela can do it, but it's not like you're going to do that every time. You don't want to try to do it. So they need that right wing and the left back too. They're going to be very active in this
Yeah.
match because you have to stay off those sidelines and just kind of Seattle just kind of puts you to sleep and 15 minutes go by and you haven't done anything with the football against the Sounders. And that's not against LAFC. That's against everybody they play.
I mean,
Barely
I
giving
think
up a goal a game, so they don't mess around when it comes defensively. Quite frankly, the team that's beaten them, offensively the worst this year at times is LAFC, the best offense in MLS. We think about those games up in Seattle. At least I did. I focused a lot on those that, oh boy, tough defeats, 3-1, 3-0, didn't look good. Frankly, two of the worst games LAFC played all year. And yet in the other two, one of them was, of course, in Orlando at a neutral site, a 4-1 thrashing. And the other one was at LAFC, a 3-1 win at the bank. They gave 7 goals LAFC scored in 2 games. Seattle's only given up like 24, 23 goals all year. And in 2 games, they gave up 7 to LAFC. So LAFC certainly knows how to break down Seattle, but the Sounders they're not going to change the way they play.
No, and I think it's going to be a very I mean, these games have been very lopsided. I think this is going to be a little bit more of a chess match. But
Yeah, I would agree.
I think just to finish up on the defensive end, I think that we also should also mention that Jesus Mourinho got injured at halftime. I believe he left at halftime. So depending what his situation is, because if Jesus Mourinho is not available, you can see Tristan Blackman and Eddie Segura right at the center back, and
It's
but we
almost an
hope.
easy decision then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it gets. Hopefully, that's not the case because you definitely need that big physical body there. And I think Seattle's such a mature team, and like you mentioned, they've always going back to last year because I don't believe Carlos Vela has played them at all this year, even in the MLS back tournament. Correct me if I'm wrong, But from last year, in last year's playoffs, they made it very difficult on Carlos Vela, and they were physical on Carlos Vela. I don't want to say on purpose because they didn't necessarily injure, but they made sure to hit him. If my from what I recall, they made him not to the point that he got injured, but they to let them know that he's there. And at
Arriaga
Seattle,
had a couple of dirty tackles. I mean, it was borderline tackles on him for
exactly.
sure.
But you get what my point is, though, right?
Sure.
That's what Seattle's going to do to Carlos Vela, and I think, and without Rossi and Brian Rodriguez and Jose Cifuentes, and I think to me is like if that's Seattle's game plan, right? To whenever Carlos Vela gets the ball in the center of the field or out wing, wherever Carlos Vela may be, if they get physical with Vela again, what's the game plan? Like can you game plan for that? Obviously, now you don't know if they're going to physically come after Carlos Vela. I'm not saying they're going to put out a hit, but that's if history repeats itself, that's how you put Carlos Vela off his game. You physically and they're also at Seattle's at home. I'm not saying they're going to have home field advantage because there's no fans, but they're also playing a turf, and I wonder if that's the game plan, part of Seattle's game plan, because we know they're going to wait, they're mature, they know, but I
Sure.
feel like if they try to put Carlos Vela's game, put him out of the game, and like how you said, how they make it so difficult, they're on the defensive end, and they don't mind waiting. What is the game plan for LAFC if they do start to get physical with Carlos Vela?
That's a great question. I would think you first of all you're going to keep as many of his teammates close to him, meaning like so you can keep the ball moving, keep it off his feet. Sometimes, not all the time. Certainly, you want Carlos on the ball an awful lot, surveying the situation. But another thing might be to get him more in the middle, give him more space, And again, you don't mind if the game gets a little bit stretched out. Certainly in the Seattle half of the field, stretch it out a little bit where you don't allow them to kind of bunch up defensively and get after you. And you know what? If they're taking down Vela when it's 1v1, those are usually in great spots. So maybe Carlos will have to take a couple of shots and get fouls drawn. And hopefully the referee, doesn't allow it to get too crazy physical, which is another factor. But if you can even draw some free kick, LAFC has been very good on set pieces this year offensively. And that could be a way to get going. They scored the first goal against Seattle that last year in the game that way with Edwards' great free kick was because of a foul drawn deep in Seattle's half. So yeah, I think you got to keep him off the sideline to where maybe they almost have to foul him. If they're going to do it, then it's in a better position. It's in the middle of the field. It's in the attacking third. You never know about drawing penalties. You don't know how that ever is going to play out in a match. But if anybody can, it's certainly Carlos Vela. And LAFC have not drawn a lot of penalties this year without
Mm-hmm.
Carlos in the lineup. We saw it towards the end of last season. People were talking about, oh, Carlos Vela is kicking, he's getting a lot of penalty kick goals at the end of the year. Well, he drew the penalties. He was beating people in
Yeah.
the box. And if they didn't foul him, he was probably going to score anyway, So I think that's kind of something we've missed a little bit without Carlos in there too, is that those dangerous opportunities into the area and getting teams, maybe drawing a penalty or two. So I think, yeah, you just have to keep him moving with teammates around him and keep him maybe even a little more central if they decide to go physical, which could help. Now, again, you mentioned Arriaga will be out. We'll see how they change up there. It might be, obviously Yamor Gomez has been great for them in the middle. He'll be there, you would imagine, if he's healthy. But that's another thing to kind of keep an eye on is what Seattle does in the middle there going forward now without Arriaga involved in this match. Arriaga is kind of to me, I want him in there. Unfortunately, he's not going to be now. He's had a pretty good year, but he's also kind of a yellow or red card waiting to happen at times. He's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit kind of, I guess, somewhat reckless with the football sometimes back there. I think Gomez is more steady. The Colombian has been really good. So unfortunately, he won't be in this match for Seattle. I think he was a player you could attack, although he's played well this year. So we'll see how they adapt to that as well against this LAFC offense.
Yeah, and I think yeah, it's definitely gonna be a chess match. I don't think it'll be another blowout game. At least I don't expect it to be. I mean, it definitely could be, but I think it's definitely going to be more of a chess match. I feel like Bob Bradley has an idea he's going to go with, whether he's going to tell us today or not. I think he really does have an idea. I think another position I know it may be up in the air. I don't believe so. Goalkeeper. Who do you like at goalkeeper? Do you stay with Kenneth Vermeer, who's played these last few games, or do you go with Pablo Cisniega, who hasn't played in, I think it'll be like close to a month coming this playoff game?
If I'm Bob and I have to make the decision, which I do for Tuesday, I go with Kenneth Vermeer. Just because I think he played pretty well in these last couple. He made forget pretty well. He made great saves.
Hmm.
Frankly, allowed LAFC to have that lead deep into that game against Portland. The 1-0 that they just couldn't get the second or third and fourth goal, and then of course I know they gave up the late one. Wasn't his fault. So I would go with Kenneth Vermeer. Again, if you go with Pablo, I have no problem with that, though. I think he's had a good year. I think the injury kind of there's some concerns that, well, even if he is or says he's 100%, you don't know, like he hasn't played in a little bit. You don't know how that injury reacts. He took a wicked shot. So I think, in fairness, I think Vermeer, right now, I guess is just maybe the slightly safer choice. I'm a poker player. It's like 55-45, it's a coin flip, tens versus ace king, but I think
Yeah.
you got to take the 55% and take your chances, and again, I like either one of them in that if that's what Bob decides to do, I'm not going to say it's certainly like, oh, I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Pablo has earned that too if he does get the start, but I would go with Vermeer right now.
Yeah, no, I agreed. Pablo has definitely earned, and for the most part, up until he picked up this injury, I think it was against LA Galaxy. I believe it's a hip. It was a hip injury. And
And
it's
again, he could be 100%. Then it's a tough decision, no
yeah,
question. But if he's not absolutely 100%, then you just got to go with Vermeer.
yeah.
As long as Kenneth is okay, he took a pretty heavy shot
Up to the
too.
head. Yeah, he took the eye protocol or the concussion protocol was pretty funny when they
Oh
showed it on
boy,
TV and stuff.
that took a while, and I don't blame him. But boy, you don't run into Dyrone Aspria, man. He is a tank. So kudos to Kenneth for even getting up there. I mean, that was a wicked shot. And again, he seemed to be okay even that night.
Mhm.
Made some big saves after that before giving up the goal late. So I would go with Vermeer, but I have no problem with either one of them. Before a lot of people thought, oh boy, goalkeeper, we don't even have one.
Yeah. Now it's the opposite. Now it's like, who do you go for? Because both
Yeah,
had
now
looked
you're
good.
confident with either one, and that's a great thing. They say that it's an old cliche in the NFL. Gio, I know you're a big sports guy. You know this. If you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one, really.
True.
So,
You yeah, true.
but we
Yeah.
have two now, like where I'm perfectly comfortable. Whoever's playing goalkeeper for LAFC, again, you still got to go out and do it. And I'm not sitting here telling you that this is Brad Friedel necessarily. Like, I mean, I understand that like guys are going to give up goals and everything, and
Mhm.
they might make mistakes. Maybe that that's fine, and they have both made mistakes, but they've also both made pretty wicked saves for this team and have played some pretty great games going down the stretch. I think the defense is really shored up in the last, not even third, maybe the last quarter of the season. Again, you're going to give up goals. I've always said this about MLS. You got to make teams score world-class goals against you. Just don't give up the cheap stuff.
Mhm.
And, frankly, too often earlier in the year, they'd give up some cheap goals. Teams would have two shots on goal and have two goals. And it seemed like that was happening way too often. Now, the keepers are more comfortable with their back lines. The communication seems to be better and better and better between both these guys with their defenders. Jesus Murillo is a fine player. That certainly helps. And now they're making big saves too. So, you know, the old adage of just riding a hot goalkeeper, it's not quite the same as like hockey, but you need a keeper to make a couple of big saves against good teams. And that's what all these playoff teams are. You're not going to get away with shutting teams down with one shot on goal for 90 minutes, not the way LAFC wants to play offense. So the style of play LAFC plays, your keeper is going to be responsible for making 2 or 3 or 4 big saves a game. And right now, I'm comfortable with either one of them doing it.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit more to that, it's going to be 16 days, and LAFC played their last
Yes.
90-minute game. So
I
even
was a
all
little
that
surprised they
momentum.
gave us a Tuesday game.
Exactly. That was just like, why not make it this Sunday or this, I
Sunday.
don't know, this weekend.
Yeah, I thought for sure they'd be playing on Saturday or Sunday this first week. But
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I think that there's what I was gonna say. Whatever the momentum Vermeer may have had, it's been 2 weeks. So
fair enough. Yeah.
regardless if you're, even Carlos Vela, you need that game time to stay in, not just in shape, but just stay ready and all that. So moving forward for LAFC, I'm excited for this match. I mean, this is, I mean, the first round matchup that everybody, all of MLS is going to want to watch. And you know, I do feel that LAFC can, they're being called the underdog. Underdog. I think even they put the like an underdog. They tweeted like underdog mentality type of thing. I forgot what it was, but that seems to be the thing with LAFC. So let me ask you, what's the final score? How do they beat Seattle? And how do they get this done on Tuesday?
They get it done by doing what they did in both Orlando and at the bank, which is actually, and it sounds crazy, it's just taking it to Seattle all over the field. And I mean, the Sounders are very comfortable giving you the football. That's not the point, because then they'll just come attack the football and take it off of you and then try to hit you on the counter. They have, again, Nico Lodero shows up everywhere on the pitch. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of some of the heat maps and all that, but his heat map must be, I mean, it's everywhere. He can show up and get the football everywhere. So you got to take him out of the match. You got to keep that ball moving and keep him way too far away from that football too often. You cannot turn the ball over where he's around, where he can get it within one touch or one pass, because then you're in a lot of trouble going the other way. So that's one thing. The second thing is you are going to need a great defensive performance. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be on your back heels much, because quite frankly, again, you're going to have a lot of the football, but it's shutting down those little, advances by Jordan Morris, where if you miss one tackle, all of a sudden he's 1v1. You have to play a great game defensively on things around midfield. And that's where the defense will really start against Seattle, because you're going to have a lot of the football in your offensive half. And then thirdly, you have to finish. And you're not going to get 15 clear-cut chances against the Sounders. There's no way. This is not Vancouver, that just wants to play a run and gun and let you go ahead and we're going to try to outscore you. The Sounders are perfectly comfortable winning 1-0 and giving you one shot on goal for 90 minutes if they have to. You have to put your chances away. And I don't mean half chances. I mean, if you get a clear-cut opportunity, it has got to be in the back of the net. And you can beat Stephen Fry. He's a fine keeper, certainly a good player. He'll make some big saves. But it's not as though, again, LAFC scored 7 goals in their 2 wins against Seattle this year. And people almost kind of forgetting those games, really, in a weird way. And yet they dominated those 2 against Seattle. It's just that the Sounders utterly dominated the other 2. I think you're right. We throw those away. This is going to be a tight game, and you have to put those chances away. I really think LAFC is the better team. And I know a lot of people don't agree with me. They think I'm a homer or whatever.
Well, they're not your natural or your normal 7th seed. They should they
Oh
sh- they
no,
sh-
there's
they should
no
be up
way.
there top. They should definitely be
Yeah,
up in the top 4.
the Sounders were just as mad as LAFC were that they gave up that goal late in that game.
I'm pretty sure they were. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't bode well for them. But here's the bottom line too. LAFC, and they know this. I'm not telling you anything that Bob is, but for my perspective, and even as fan, this is one of 4. We're not looking ahead past this game because there's no way you can when you're going to be on the road against Seattle. But this is just one game. I honestly, we see that too often in sports. I mean, look, the Galaxy, big win against the Galaxy in the playoffs. What does Seattle do to you the next game? They just take you out of your rhythm. Even though you had the 1-0 lead, the Sounders never panic, which they don't. Doesn't matter if we get up 1-0, they're not going to panic. But it's just one game on a trip to trying to win 4 straight. You only can do that one at a time. I get that. But this is the first step, and they got to just take care of that business then. And either team can win this game. There's nobody knows who's really going to win this game, and even the 2 teams don't.
But give us a prediction. LAFC prediction.
I really do. I think it's going to be 2-1 LAFC. And in this case, I think you might see one of those amazing finishes with the late goal, because I think it could be that 1-1 kind of really tough. Somebody gets a goal in the first half, other team gets an early second half goal, and all of a sudden the momentum is just going back and forth. kind of settles down maybe for a lot of the second half in terms of like nobody can crack that, and all of a sudden you're worried about stoppage time, extra time and all. Somebody's going to get that late goal for LAFC, and I think 2-1 is probably the most realistic of what I could see for this match.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I definitely see it being that close to one, and just to add to that, I think it's gonna come down to the second half adjustments. Whoever goes up first, may come down to the last 20 minutes. The real game, the game within the game, may come down within the last 10, 20 minutes of the game. And I think that's what it could also be a big save, by Stephen Fry or Kenneth
True too.
Pereira
That's
to also give them credit. So like I said, I'm excited for this match, and I'm definitely looking forward to see, what LAFC can do against a tough Seattle team. But yeah, Dave, that is all the time we have. I appreciate you being on. Is there anything else you want to say before we let you get out of here?
No, I'm just ready. We'll have the game on Tuesday night, 7:10 ESPN, the ESPN app. I'm so looking forward to calling it. I love the playoffs, and I try to bring the passion every game, but the playoffs are just that next level. So I'm ready.
Yeah, yeah. Let me ask you, where do you call the game? Are you calling the games from out here, or do they fly you out there?
No, I do from a studio. So we don't travel in this day and age. I haven't been to a game since March. When we were back
Mhm.
before all the COVID hit. All the first stop. So I do them from a studio. So yeah, I am not at the bank in this time because they're so limited on how many. Well, they're so limited on how many people they can bring in that I can do the games from elsewhere. So they just said, okay, we'll use we have like people on for the radio that are there,
Mhm.
making sure the audio and everything, get the crowd noise. That was a dumb thing to say, but we get the noise of the bank and all that. But I am not there. So, and most broadcasters aren't this year. Not all, of course, but most are not.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's definitely always fun hearing you call the games or even call the goals. I think that's the most exciting thing, hearing you call those goals. So, looking forward to it. You calling a few LAFC goals this next Tuesday. For the people that don't already follow you, where can they follow you at?
Yeah, on Twitter at Talk Soccer, which is pretty easy to figure out there, I guess. And then Instagram is just my name, Dave, but the underscore in the middle, Dave underscore Denholm, and that's where you can find me on Instagram as well.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Yeah, if you guys enjoyed this podcast, make sure to give this a 5-star rating. You guys can follow me at Gio Garcia LA on Twitter, and make sure to follow LA Soccer Hub on all social media. And like I said, you can listen to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your music. You can definitely listen to this. For Dave, this is Gio. Thanks, everybody.